final video of this week, I'm actually going to talk about the Star Trek films. It's a nice silly one to finish off because hopefully it makes a good double bill video with the Fleischer stuff I did yesterday. I just thought it'd be fun. I've never actually talked the Star Trek film as I was meant to. It's like, it's almost Christmas, I might as well do it just now. I don't need to actually watch tons of them again because I've seen them so many times over the years, basically, because they've always been out when I was a kid and as I grew up, and there's always been new iterations of them. So there are 13 of them, so this may take a while, but I'm going to try and just give you a basic outline of them all. I'm not going to do plot synopses unless I need to. I'll just try and give an outline of what they are and ones I like, ones I don't like, and stuff like that. I just think that's probably good enough because you've probably all seen them ultimately. Right. Now, I like the TV show, the original series. That is my favourite of the Star Trek. Still, basically, is a TV show, the original TV show. The films are good, but they're plus points. But the TV shows, I think, are the best stuff. So we start off with Star Trek: The Motion Picture, which is one of those films I've got a soft spot for. It's an unusual film in that it's very pretentious and very weird and very slow, because Gene Roddenberry had a lot of pretensions about him, and he was jealous of 2001 how revered it was. Because Star Trek had ideas in it, and it brought in a lot of good writers in the TV show, but it was still an adventure show. I mean, that's what it works best as, an adventure show with some ideas. That's what it is. It has to have the adventure plus the ideas. In some later stuff, it seems to have more adventure than ideas. But the idea of the best combination is some good ideas and a sense of adventure, and that kind of combination of that works, and also some dark and some light. It needs a balance to make it really deliver a good Star Trek story. And this film did not have any of that. This film was shot by Robert Wise. He was directing it, so he had a good old pair of hands on it. They brought the cast back from the TV show, and they spent a fortune on the budget. Most of the film went in special effects. They redid the Enterprise and made it a much bigger ship. They spent a fortune on the effects. People did not have a clue what they were looking at half the time, because there was all these effects going through this landscape to show alien stuff, but nothing was actually happening. And that's why I like the film, but it's why a lot of people hate it. A lot of people just thought it was just boring because nothing happened. They were just watching special effects coming at you. I liked it because you could sit back and relax and see these weird images. But there wasn't much characterization. A lot of characterization was very basic, and the acting was a bit arch and a bit cold, and he didn't engage in a human level in any way, really. And it was too long for what the film was. It was just too long and too stretched out, and it didn't have much of a payoff. It just felt it was trying to be 2001 and trying to be weird and very alien. Then the payoff was ultimately kind of stupid when you actually got to it. Like, it turns out the villain was an old satellite that had been sent out, that had gone through a black hole and rebuilt, and become self-aware. But the things they sent out in the 60s were so old, or 60s and 70s were so basic that it doesn't quite make sense. But it works fine as a conceit, though. It's just, it was a good special effects journey, even though the human level was just not there. So after that film was a hit, but it was not a big enough hit to inspire another film like it. It's thought, okay, we're going to try a different tack with this. We're going to cut the budget down quite a bit and bring in people who are focused on characters. So they bring in Nicholas Meyer, who'd done Time After Time, and they asked him to write and direct this film and come up with a story. And so they came up with the Khan story of Khan coming back from a TV show, out for revenge against Kirk, and the idea of the whole thing about being about aging and being about mortality, and the idea that this cast was now quite old. They weren't young anymore. Like, these were middle-aged actors, and they actually play into that idea. Like, Kirk needs glasses. He can't run around all the time now. He had to send out other people to do stuff. And that's what really made it work. I mean, the film is the most revered Star Trek movie. It went from the lowest to the highest in a lot of estimations. I like motion picture a lot as well, though. But this one really works. I mean, this is one of the best of the Star Trek films. It really works. It really delivers. the plot isn't as complicated as people think it is, but it works, and it's got a nice idea of the Genesis planet, which is this planet that takes apart what was there and creates a new planet instead. And it's a really good idea, and Khan's a really good villain because he's very motivating, very angry, and very furious with Kirk. So there's good revenge tale, some good ideas, and the idea of aging. Plus, you have Spock's sacrifice at the end. So it's a wonderful film, really easy to rewatch. All the actors look relaxed and enjoyable. The chemistry's there again. Everyone's now clicking as characters. Everyone's now enjoying themselves in the scenes. So it all works. It's all great to watch. Then we go to the third one, which is Search for Spock, which was directed by Leonard Nimoy, who played Spock. And this was the idea of how to bring him back, and it was kind of the undoing of Rapper Khan. It's one of those films, it's a weird one, because there's good stuff in it, but there's also a lot of bad stuff in it. It's like, this is awkward, because they undo the Genesis thing by saying Genesis doesn't work, because they did something wrong in it. And in the second film, Kirk had a son who's killed off in this third one, which feels kind of nasty, and just, why do you bother? Why introduce a character to come off in the next movie? Like everything they introduced in the last movie gets taken back. Like Spock got killed in the last movie, now he's taken back and he comes back to life through Genesis planet and he survives. And the whole thing just is very clunky and weird. But they've a good Klingon villain played by Christopher Lloyd. The acting's still enjoyable. You've got DeForest Kelly's bones actually having Spock's soul in him, driving him mad, which is a nice touch in the film. That's the thing that works best. And the idea of the Enterprise being destroyed, the first time of many. But this time it worked really well because you didn't expect it. And it is enjoyable, but it's just a bit pompous and a bit... It's sort of like... It's one of those things that... It's taking back stuff you very set up, and it's like... It's annoying, because it's like... When you build something, you should build from the last one to this one and do something interesting with it and build the next thing. This one, it was just taking it back because it was like, oh, too many ideas, we can't deal with this, we'll just destroy them all. That's the problem with the film. It's like it kind of takes back so much from the last film that it's annoying. So that's Star Trek 3. It's fine, but it's not as good as the films around it. Because Star Trek 4 was Nimoy's second film in charge. At this point, he made Three Men and a Little Lady, Three Men and a Baby, I think. I'm not sure if this came before or after, but it's when he decided to become a comedy director and started to work a lot with actors, and he knew what he was doing. He found his feet by this point, and there was more comedy. Like, it's a time travel movie where they go back in time to the 80s to get a humpback whale because there's an alien thing coming to Earth. It will destroy Earth if it can't get a signal, which is the signal of a humpback whale, which is a species that become extinct. So they have to go and get some humpback whales to answer this thing to make up for the past. And it's basically the whole crew back, and now they have to work within dealing with time travel and dealing with a past that they don't understand. So it's a comedy about them trying to interact with the past. There's also an adventure story of them trying to get the whales. Kirk has a love story that works quite nicely. Everything works in this film. It's just so enjoyable. It doesn't quite have the depth of the second one, but it brings back Nicholas Meyer to do some of the writing. And it's very much a time after time thing. And you've got Nimoy knows what he's doing in directing. He gets all the actors to relax, and everything works. It's very enjoyable. It's a very fun film. And this is why it became a case of the odd ones were the bad ones, the even films were the good ones, because it was going that way for a long time. Because after this one, after the big success, where everyone felt good about the series again, it was like, oh wow, this series is really working now. They've worked it out. They had a few bumps along the road, but even the bumps were relatively minor. It was like the films weren't as good as the strong ones, but they're still okay. And no one was thrown back. They got to number 5, which almost killed the series, which was now Shatner got to direct a film. Shatner was not a good director. You know, he's an actor who needed direction a lot. As a director, he let everyone overact. And the film was basically a mess because there's idea about search for God, which is not what Star Trek's about, ultimately. It's about the search for answers, and this God's just a concept that is very vague, and the idea of dealing with religious manias, it turns out God's just this prisoner, this signal that's coming out of the centre of a galaxy that's basically a prisoner who's in prison because he's a maniac. And have to deal with it ultimately, and it just becomes this idea of trying to deal with religion in the Star Trek universe, but they don't know how, but it's so vague how to do it, it doesn't really work. And the end's kind of disappointing. But I really like this film, even though it is a total mess. I mean, for a while becomes Die Hard and Enterprise, where they have to try and keep back their ship. There's way over the top acting. It's utterly insane, but it's enjoyable. I really enjoy it, even though it's hard to defend. To defend it is very difficult because it doesn't make sense in a lot of ways. And it got terrible reviews, it got torn to bits, it almost killed the series, but I can enjoy it. It came out just after Batman, and Batman utterly decimated it. Now with the light on, we go to part 6. Yeah, the sun went, and suddenly started pouring down outside, so I have to go for lights. Part 6 is another really enjoyable film. Again, they brought back Nicholas Meyer, who was pretty much in, out, and was always back for the good ones. Really. He directed this one, he was wanting to direct this one, to say goodbye to the crew, because the idea was they would be taken over by the Next Generation crew, which was a TV show that followed Star Trek, and they would take over the film series. Because the cast was getting really old at this point, it was like, they can't keep on going. They either have to bring in other characters, or we just have to move on to the Next Generation. So they went, we'll go to the Next Generation. So this was the final big hurrah for the crew, the original crew, and it was a really good send-off. The idea was that it was all about the Klingon Empire was collapsing because the moon, which was most of the energy, had blown up, and they were going to become refugees. So it was a metaphor for Chernobyl and the Russian collapse in the late 80s, and Glasnost and all the rest of it. It was a metaphor for that because the Klingons were the Russians of the show, the kind of brutes that were trying to take over and didn't love peace the way the good old-fashioned Americans did. So, that's what it was about, really, was them dealing with the Russians or dealing with the Klingons. And there's conspiracies from inside both parties who do not want peace to happen. They want the war to continue because they're scared of the change and they don't really want it to become this way. And this is the moment of Passover, of change. And Kirk has to lead the crew for a diplomacy mission, even though he lost his son to the Klingons, and basically he says he's too old. He's set in his ways against the Klingons. He's not the kind of guy who you should have, but he has to go do it anyway. The Klingon ambassador is killed. Kirk and McCoy are set up as the killers. They get sent to jail in the Klingon Empire, and so you have two plots of Kirk and McCoy having to survive in jail, and Spock having to work out what actually happened, and work out the conspiracy. So it's all about change, and all about people having to learn to live with change and live with aging and dealing with the idea that your time is over, because this is Enterprise's last mission. It's going to be decommissioned. The crew's going to be decommissioned. They're all going to go retire after this. Anyway, so it becomes this story about them facing the futility of war and futility of hanging on to old grudges. It's a wonderful film. It's another one I really enjoy. It's another personal favourite of the series. It's not as rated as high search for, as high as Vacker Can, or the Nicholas Meyer films, but I like it just as much as I can, actually. I really enjoy this one. It just doesn't have the big villain like Can, but it's actually a very well made film. So that's a really enjoyable film. Good send off to the crew. Then we have Generations, which is again another odd number one that is okay. Ronald Moore, who wrote Battlestar Galactica, was one of the writers on this one. Him and his partner, the writing part of the time, wrote this one. It was a Passover. Like Shatner came back, and so did Scotty and Chekhov for a brief intro scene. Then it was just Shatner for the rest of it, dealing with the Next Generation crew. It was all about time. Malcolm McDowell played the villain. The idea was Kirk was stuck in a Nexus, and he lived out his fantasies. And it's not as good as the reality, and it's a lot of vague stuff about death and time, and it doesn't quite hang together as a film. It's enjoyable though. It's not a horrible film, but it's mainly a Next Generation film, and it falls back into some of the smugness the problem I have with Next Generation. It can be a very smug show, and the crew can be a bit smug, and that's the problem I have with this film. But I still think it's an enjoyable film. I just think it's a very flawed one. It's better than its reputation, but not that good. But then we get to the best of the Next Generation films, is First Contact. This is probably my favourite Star Trek film. Even though I don't really like the Next Generation cast that much compared to the originals, I think this film really works. Jonathan Frakes, who was one of the actors in it, directed this one, because he directed some of the TV episodes, and he does a really good job. Ronald Moore comes back as a writer. It's a time travel thing with the Borg, who are this Terminator type race who assimilate all the different cultures into their collective machine culture. They're going to go back and attack Earth in the past because their plans were destroyed when the Federation fought them and beat them. So they go back in time to get the Federation before it was built, before the First Contact happened, which was the moment where they discovered warp power and human beings moved around the stars. So that's what they were trying to destroy. So they had to go back. The Enterprise had to go back, stop that from happening, as well as establish contact and make sure First Contact happens, and just basically fight the Borg. So you have two plots. You've got the First Contact plot, and you've got to fight against the Borg on the ship. Both of which work really well, because you've got Patrick Stewart going die hard on them. And this works a lot better than Final Frontier, because you've got a younger crew, you've got an obsessive captain who was once assimilated by the Borg, and he's really out for revenge. You've also got the darkness of that versus the lightness of First Contact and the optimism of what's going to happen there. So it's a really good balance of light and darkness in this film, and it really just works. The Borg are a really good threat, because they are threatening there non-stop. So the threat's always there, but there's also got the hope as well. So it's a really good mix. So, yeah, this is my favourite Star Trek. I think Wrath of Khan's probably a better film, but this is my favourite one. So there we go. Then we go to my least favourite Star Trek film, which is also directed by Jonathan Frakes. This is Insurrection, number 9. This is bad. This is a film without a point. It's really boring. And it's not a film that's director's fault. It's like the script doesn't work. He's stuck with a script that has no momentum. And they try to do all this stuff to try and keep it paced up. But the script is all about Federation corruption, the eternal life. And it goes back to all the garbage from the generations, but it does it in a much more boring way. And it just doesn't hang together at all. It's just really tedious. And I don't. It's the one film in the series I would try to avoid watching, because it's not. The actors are fine, the directing's fine. It's the script's bloody awful. The script should have been dumped, because there's no way to survive this script. No matter what you do, there's no way to survive it. And all the actors are now asked to play a bit broader. They've been written broader, so they try to be charming, but they're just annoying. So that's the problem. Then we finally go to the finale, of the Next Generation cruise. So they only really get 4 films, and only one of them was really good. This one was the even one, so I thought this was the return to form because it's the even one, but it didn't really happen that way. Stuart Baird, I think his name, he was the director. He was an editor who'd done a couple of films like Executive Decision, which was good fun. But he directed this one and didn't seem to have much of a feel for Star Trek. But had a good idea behind it though, which was the thing that worked. The idea that a clone of Picard was taken and was used by the Romulans, who were the other main villains of the series. And he was brought up, and he was rageful, and he was angry, and he represented Picard when Picard was younger. So Picard knows he's dealing with someone who's damaged, because he said he was a very angry young person. And this guy is played by Tom Hardy, who's great. Events get him against Patrick Stewart, Picard, through Picard's really make the film work. For those scenes, the film works. As soon as they're together, it works. The rest of the time is very unfocused and very floaty, and a lot of action scenes, but it becomes too actiony towards the end, and it just doesn't quite come together. But it's still a nice effort, though. I mean, it's not the worst one. It's still got some good stuff. It just is it's too actiony. It's not directed by a guy who could really bring it together. It's one of those things where they should have had the Storm Freaks directed the last two do this one, and the guy did this one could have done number 9. You know, may have given something to number 9 with the action, it might have helped that one. But this one needs a more old hand approach of someone who would actually work on the ideas rather than work on having tons of action. This was too actiony, and it kind of ignored the ideas behind it. So that was the problem. Okay, now we're going to the reboot. Now, Star Trek was dead for a while, like 8-9 years. Like, there was TV shows. It had been overdone, really, because during the 90s, the Next Generation TV shows a big hit. Then you had Deep Star Nine, big hit. Then they followed these up with Voyager and Enterprise, two shows that weren't as well thought of. And the film series had kind of collapsed in itself, really, after basically after First Contact. I mean, Insurrection hadn't done that well, and then the next one was meant to be the comeback, didn't do that well. And it was just like, what do you do with this now? Because it's not working for the audience anymore. It's just not working. So they left it a while, and then eventually came back with this one, with the reboot, which was, instead of just rebooting it, they actually, because that would annoy the fans really badly. This one just mild annoyed the fans. They had an idea, was like, what if something happens in the future, he comes back and then messes around with a timeline and creates an alternate universe, so you have new adventures with the younger crew of the original crew, basically, and you can start again, but you have new adventures and a new cast. The characters are still there, so you can just see it's not exactly the same. It's a different universe. The normal universe exists one bit, and we exist in another bit, which is a decent enough idea, actually. The problem with all three movies ultimately is, even though they've a good cast, they're not good idea movies. They're emotional movies, but they really do a lot of like decisions that are not based on reality at all and are based on emotion, which works for some things but not for others. I mean, the big problem that happens in the second one, Into Darkness, is the big flawed one. I'll start with the first one. The first one is basically it starts off in the day of Kirk's birth, where he's born in space when the ship he's on and his dad works on is attacked by the villain Nero, played by Eric Bana. The ship's attacked, his dad dies, saving his ship, Kirk escapes, and then we jump till Kirk's a young man, and until he's a teenager, we see he's having problems with his parents. But you find out later on that in another reality, Kirk's dad survived. There was no attack. Kirk's dad survived and they had a good relationship. So that's a Kirk with a damaged past because his dad died when he didn't in the universe. So you have two different Kirks, basically. You have a Kirk who's now dealing with a lot of trauma that the original version didn't deal with. So it's a slightly different character. So you see him as a young man having problems. He has no direction, he has no focus. He doesn't have somebody to say, you should go on to do this. And this will tamper down your rebellious nature by being Starfleet. He doesn't have that. But what he does ultimately have is Pike, who was the original captain of the original ship in the original series before Shatner took over for one story. Before they rebooted. Because there was an original pilot called The Cage. It didn't get picked up, but they redid a new episode with Shatner as a new captain that was picked up, and that became Star Trek. So this character Pike becomes an important thing of getting Kirk into Starfleet, and then you see him meeting with Spock, who's having his own problems, and then meeting with all the other crew members bit by bit, in a way that's full of coincidences. But you have to just go with it. I mean, it's some of those things is like, yeah, they wouldn't really meet up this way, but they've got an adventure story to tell, and you have to get from A to B. So this is like a ship adventure, like a very old-fashioned adventure tale. It could have just been a ship voyage, in a Robert Louis Stevenson kind of story. Instead, it's a sci-fi movie, but it's the same thing, really. It's taking adventure motifs and ignoring the sci-fi, really, ultimately. I mean, there are some really bad gaffes, which I'll explain later. So basically, you see that Kirk going up the ranks in Starfleet as a cadet. He's very arrogant, he's very full of himself, he's got a lot to prove, but he is smart. And he starts to tangle with Spock a bit because Spock very unemotional and they don't appreciate each other at all. And Kirk finds a way around Spock's test that prove that there's no way to actually deal with this and actually win the test, but Kirk finds a way by cheating, basically. And it's a metaphor for their interactions. Kirk doesn't like defeat, Spock likes rules, and it's like how they have to learn to work together because both sides have strengths and weaknesses. So it's that kind of thing is they learn to work together as they deal with Neo coming back, and Neo destroys Vulcan, which is Spock's home planet, which was lasted throughout the entire original series. So that's a change from canon. And it becomes about them learning to work together to defeat Neo. But they hate each other to start with. Like Spock thinks Kirk's an idiot. And then he just thinks he's someone who's very opinionated. And Kirk sees Spock's good point, but also sees Spock's too unbending, didn't take enough chances to when there's obviously a problem. So Kirk in this universe is shown as smart but undisciplined, which I think is the problem a lot of people have because it's a younger version of Kirk and he's didn't have the discipline that Shatner's Kirk had. Shatner's Kirk took chances, but he usually worked out in advance what he was going to do. Like he was more disciplined than this version, which I think annoys a lot of people, but it's meant by younger Kirk who's more anger issues. So for me that was fine. Plus Chris Pine plays Kirk really well. He's a lot of charm and there is a kind of gravity to him that actually helps quite nicely. And all the cast really work, even though Simon Pegg Scotty's accent's a bit over the top. But so is James Doohan's Scotty performance. So he's been loyal in some way by being a bit over the top with a Scottish accent. Everyone's good in the film. There are blunders though. I mean, they do take there's magic science in these films that is kind of annoying. Like really convenient explanations of things. There's one point where they break a rule, like they find a way so that Kirk and Scotty can teleport through, not just through space, but through into a moving vehicle, which is a moving ship. Which Scotty says that's a really stupid thing. He had these problems with calculations because he didn't take into account how the space was moving. It was like, you're an engineer, that'd be the first thing you'd think of. That's the basic thing. That's like being on a ship and not taking into account the idea that you're moving in a ship. It's so stupid a line. It's like, oh my god, they don't have a clue how things work. And that's the big problem with some of these movies, these new movies, is these basic things they do not think about. But you have to kind of ignore them. And it works really well. Old Spock comes back as Nimoy and he gives Kirk some advice that helps him. And they end up defeating Nero and they end up learning how to work as a team. And it works nice. It's a good emotional adventure, even though there's some flaws. It's too actiony at times. But it still works though. You still like the characters. And there is a sense of wonder with space, which we really need in Star Trek, which is something the Next Generation for me lacked. A sense of wonder. It was too much like someone going to a job. It's just in space. I think this one brought back the wonder of space, which actually was really nice. It was just they weren't very good at science. And all this came really to head in the second one, Into Darkness, which is along with Insurrection, it's probably the worst Star Trek movie. It really is. It's pretty dire in lots of places. It wasn't as I rewatched for this video, and it wasn't as bad as I remember it, but it's still pretty bad. Because it goes too fast and doesn't stop to think about anything. It just goes, and the characterization is pretty weak in a lot of places. I mean, pretty much unless you're Kirk or Spock, you do not get characterization. I mean, Hoover gets a little bit, and Scotty gets a little bit, but that's very basic stuff. Everyone else gets very basic stuff, and it's having Kirk do mistakes that aren't set up well enough. Like that idea that's not really brought up, which would have helped a lot, as clear as that this happens not long after the first movie. This is Kirk in space, and Kirk's still not following rules. I mean, the film feels like he's been out in space for a while, and he's now doing this when they should have clarified it more. That no, this was the side effect of what happened in the first film, which they promoted him so quickly that he never learned how to follow rules, and that's not clear enough in the film, which is a problem. It's because you watch the films back to back, so I watched them one day after another. Really, it becomes clear that this takes place very quickly after the first film. This is Kirk learning how to follow the rules, but it's unclear in the film if you've been waiting a couple of years between films. He just becomes across what's his problem. And the idea is Kirk's jumping from thing to thing. Pike gets killed really early on in a setup, which he kind of spots as a problem somewhere, but he acts for revenge rather than actually thinking it through. And then throughout the film, he's working out like how to actually be a proper commander and actually value his people better, which is a nice idea, but it's just not clarified enough. He doesn't work with people. The characters aren't fleshed out enough in this movie because they're in a sort of race to move forward to the next thing. And they bring back Khan as a villain, played by Benedict Cumberbatch, the whitest looking man ever to play Khan. And the casting doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Like, you know it's Khan from the off, from all the trailers they did. And he doesn't work as Khan. He's too calculating. Khan is calculating in the TV show, and he's a bit more rabid in the movie. But he's always smart, but he's not as calculating as this guy is. And it doesn't work. It just does not work. The character is showing a different character to make it work. But the character's motivation just seems to be whatever the plot wants it to be. Because it's just about what Kirk's journey is rather than what other people's journey is. Everyone else around Kirk is viewed as someone whose existence doesn't really matter so much. Even Spock's there pretty much to tell Kirk he's been wrong, to prove Kirk is wrong, to learn about emotions and learn about dealing with death. But it doesn't really land as well because it's just not written right. And the last third is a disaster. The last third goes full in for action, destroys everything. It's like a massive effects budget blow up. And they go for it, and there's some nice action, but it's like, why we're watching this action? There's lots of scenes here that I'm watching, it's like, well done, but it's not that great. And where's the character stuff? That's the problem with the film, there's not enough character stuff. You know, a weakly motivated villain, you've got a secondary villain that's also weakly motivated, but that villain's, at least his motivation is to get out into a war with Klingons to defeat them because what happened in the first film has been the Federation weak, so he just thinks we need to be stronger just to secure our lines, you know. But he's much of a warrior, basically, which played by Peter Weller, who's good, but he's not really given that much to do. And that's probably the film, no one's given that much to do, no one's given complexity. It's a really weakly written script. And it just wasn't developed right. You just have feeling that this film should have been delayed until they got the script. It's like, this is what we're going to do. Now let's redevelop it to make all this other stuff work. Let's get this villain right. You know, it just doesn't feel right. It feels like a villain that doesn't quite connect in. So, it doesn't work. So that's Into Darkness. So even me try to be nice about it, I can't be that nice about it. Because it's a very frustrating film. And it lives up to the title Into Darkness because the lights are always turned off. apart from every so often you get a lot of light from the Enterprise, then the rest of the time it's in darkness. Plus, the ending's a reverse of Stratford Can, but done really badly, and they end up with a solution to the problem that makes basically means you've now suddenly got a supply of blood that will cure everything for you, which is the laziest plot device ever. It's embarrassing. When you watch the finale of this film, it's like, I can't believe they went there. That is the most embarrassing ending ever for a film. It's really bad. It tanks the rest of the goodwill of the film. Like, before that point, I was trying to give it some goodwill. But every time I get to that ending, it's like, Jesus Christ, what are they doing? It's really bad. Right, finally we go to Star Trek Beyond. The new director, Justin Lin. I mean, the first two were done by J.J. Abrams. Went on to do Star Wars. This is Justin Lin, who was doing Fast and Furious movies. This is the best of the new lot of films for me. Simon Pegg was one of the writers of it. It's much more of an episode story where basically it's one story of their adventures, but it's not expansive in any other way. It's just like they're dealing with this one problem, which is they've done a 5-year mission. They come to the end of it and they're trying to decide, okay, what do you do next? Do you move forward or do you move back, or what do you do? And then they get a call, basically an emergency call, so they have to go out and deal with it while everyone might be recuperating. So they go and deal with it. Turns out the Enterprise is attacked and destroyed on the planet. Yep, another Enterprise has been destroyed. It happens a lot, happens in Generations as well. And it Enterprise gets trashed into darkness too. I mean, it happens all the time now. It's not a surprise anymore. It's like, it doesn't get trashed, you think that's amazing. It's true. Basically what happens after that is they're stuck on a planet and have to go into teams. So Sulu's with Uhura, Chekhov and Kirk are together, McCoy and Spock are together, and Spock's injured. So you get a lot of, basically it makes up for the last film where no one got anything to do apart from Kirk. Now everyone's interacting with each other and it's a team effort. And that's what makes the film really work, is like, the plot's not great. The plot's just like dealing with this mysterious guy who's on this planet who's attacking things. It turns out he wants something that's in the safe of the Enterprise that they were transporting at the time that will give him a lot of power. And you have to deal with that, and you have to find ways to deal with no ship and no chance of help, and they have to find ways to rescue their own team and to help each other to survive. So Scotty finds this woman who's been trapped in the planet for a while, and she's found a home inside this old Enterprise ship, or this old Federation ship. McCoy and Spock are investigating the old culture, making discoveries about the culture. Kirk and Chekhov and Anthony Newton's one of his final performances, where he unfortunately died, are working out why the attack happened, and the Uhura and Sulu are captives, and they're working in what's happening with the villain. So they've all got things to do, and it's all quite interesting. They all slowly come together and eventually create a plan to actually fight the guys and try and basically get back to the base and actually help the base survive an attack from this villain, played by Idris Elba. It's really enjoyable. It's not any hard sci-fi thing, it's just a character, it's pure character, some good action. Justin Lin is a much better director for Star Trek than J.J. Abrams are for me, because you can tell he's a fan of it, but he's still a professional director. He does some really cool stuff with action. He's really good with the idea of gravity and different perspectives. They're doing that in Into Darkness a bit, but they didn't do it that well. And then he comes along and he just does it perfect. There's all these weird angles of stuff, of the way perspectives in space, because there's no up or down, interact with each other. It creates this weird, interesting tension in the frame that just works. The characterization is much better, because even though he works in Fast and Furious, he's working in absurd movies. He was still working in melodramas with these actors with distinct characters. So he knows how to work with actors, even though it's not the most high depth story. He knows how to do these kind of melodramas. So he knows how to work with the script and make it work, and make the villain work, and give all the actors their time to shine in the movie. So it's just really enjoyable. It's the most fun of the 3 films for me. It's the most enjoyable, and it's it's one of the strongest Star Trek movies for me. Definitely the one of the reboots that I would class with the original crew ones as being a good Star Trek movie. So that's my Star Trek video. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm sure it's way too long, but I thought it'd be fun to do. So I'll see you later with next week, really, with some more videos. I hope you enjoyed this, and bye for now.